Every country on Earth is in debt. The United States, for example, it currently owes $38 trillion. This is the highest figure in its history. The European Union owes around 14 trillion, Japan nearly 9 trillion. Even oil-rich nations or export powerhouses like Germany and China hold massive amounts of debt. So a question naturally comes to mind. If everyone is in debt, who is all this debt owed to? Here's where things get interesting. I'm the economic historian. This is where money, power, and history collide. And let me tell you, nothing is ever as simple as it looks. Debt isn't just a burden. It's the invisible skeleton of the modern world. Wars, crises, rises, collapses, all sit on top of this debt structure. And when you trace debt far enough, you face a surprising truth. The world isn't really indebted to anyone in particular. It's indebted to itself. But of course, that doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. Total global debt has now reached nearly 3 times the size of the world economy, $315 trillion. How did we get here? The answer doesn't start with credit cards. It begins much earlier, right in the middle of war. In 1694, England was at war with France and running out of gold. The king knocked on the merchants' doors. "Give us gold and we'll pay you interest from future taxes," he said. This was the birth of the Bank of England, and for the first time in history, a state became able to spend money it didn't yet have. It was a revolution. The state made a promise, and investors bought that promise. This was the foundation of modern government bonds. Other countries followed. Europe, America. Debt became not a failure, but a symbol of strength. Fast forward to today. Debt is now the world's greatest export. The U.S. owes $38 trillion. Japan over $9 trillion. And the world adds another $1 trillion in debt every 100 days. Everyone is in debt, but at the same time, everyone is lending to each other. Taxes, pension funds, banks, all of us are both debtors and creditors. So who is on the other end of this enormous chain of debt? Let's break it down using the U.S. as an example. About half of that $38 trillion is owed to investors. And the majority of those investors are Americans themselves, banks, funds, even the U.S. Federal Reserve. The remaining $9 trillion is held by foreigners. Japan holds around $1 trillion, China around $800 billion. So the phrase America owes China is true, but it's only about 2% of the total. In reality, America's debt is mostly owed to America. The government issues bonds, banks buy them. The central bank buys them when needed. Taxes pay the interest, and the interest goes right back to American investors. A complete cycle. And this cycle exists not only in the U.S., but everywhere. Japan lends to the U.S. The U.S. lends to Europe. Through the IMF, Europe lends to developing countries, and they invest their reserves back into American bonds. The world is in a giant loop. Everyone holds everyone else's debt. The greatest power in this system is the financial markets. They decide which countries borrow cheaply and which must pay extremely high interest. When confidence disappears, currencies fall and governments shake. And at the heart of all this, central banks. As governments borrow, they create money. One side's debt becomes the other side's asset. Every dollar in circulation corresponds to a debt somewhere. Here's the interesting part. Governments don't borrow to pay off debt. They borrow to roll it over, just like a subscription. Debt that comes due is paid with new debt. The real product of the economy is interest. The world breathes through that interest, which is why statements like, "the government will pay off its debt," are just pleasant-sounding political slogans. If all debt truly disappeared, the economic system would collapse. Because government bonds are the world's safest assets. Banks use them as collateral. Central banks create money against them. The problem is, this system works only as long as there is trust. When trust fades, the numbers stop mattering. And while it's true that we owe the debt to ourselves, that's only part of the story. Because interest payments don't distribute evenly. They are collected from workers and taxpayers and delivered to large financial institutions. This is why inequality rises alongside debt. In short, debt is like the heart that keeps the modern world alive. But when it stops working, things get very personal. There is no single villain in this system. Not China, not the IMF, not Wall Street. The creditor and the debtor are all of us. Modern finance has turned debt into money. Governments issue debt, banks multiply it, investors trade it, and we become dependent on it. Debt was once a form of bondage, now it's balance. But if that balance ever breaks, we'll remember what debt really is, a promise that cannot be kept forever. If this video gave you a new perspective, don't forget to subscribe. History hides the answers, and I'll show you where to find them.